So, this is exciting news. We have our first ban list since, gosh, Moschery way back at like the beginning of Opus 17. So, if you're not in any FFTCG discords, we just got the news that Althea and Syldra, two Opus 12 heroes, just got banned from standard play. Let's go ahead. I'm going to go over the reasoning and kind of the metagame implications. Obviously, we don't know the full implications because we don't know the entire set of Opus 20, and this is not enforced until after the 28th, which is when the new set releases, but let's take a look. So Althea, if you haven't read her, she enters the field, she activates a character other than herself, basically refunds 1 CP with extra utility if you wanted to. You can reactivate a forward potentially if you'd rather have that. You can tap her, choose a character other than herself, and return both of them to their owner's hand. So what she ends up doing is she creates this really weird storm payload anti-interaction, really powerful piece that just it's very hard to deal with Althea. She protects your field from board wipes. She allows you to repeat the most powerful on entry effect. She is not once per turn. So as long as you can target multiple things to bounce, you can bounce all of them back to hand as long as you can keep reactivating Althea on the stack. She is maybe one of the most toxic cards in the game. Probably up there with Moschery for just how much she stifles your ability to interact with your opponent's field. If your opponent has an active Althea or a way to activate Althea, then you cannot do anything targeting without the risk of Althea returning to hand. So the official notice from them is she can be easily reused multiple times, became a key card with long-term use in mono wind where the number of casts are counted. It's contributed to games lasting a long time due to the associated increase in choice of actions for the player, because it's likely to be continually used in the future as a central card in powerful decks with a high possibility of being used again and again. This card has been banned. So, real quick, reasoning on stuff like this is always a little bit difficult. Yu-Gi-Oh! Infamously had one list where they did this and then proceeded to never do it again because of the crap they received for it. I know Duel Links does this, Magic does this. Most of the time when you do things like this, people are generally not going to be happy because you're not addressing the fact that these cards... It's very hard to just say, yeah, these cards are ruining the game right now. Or, not that these cards are even ruining the game, but like, if they were, it's very hard to just say that, right? So, the big thing they point out here that actually is interesting is contributed to games lasting a long time. Win decks tend to go to time very often. Althea is a key reason why. Because she increases the number of available actions to the player, you can do a lot more on each of your turns. But also, if she is able to be used on your opponent's turn, every action they have has to account for Althea, which tends to slow down the gameplay on their side as well because there's so many more... There's just more known interactions that cause issues and sticky, there's really gummy board states, and I'm really happy to see this card go. I like Althea. I think it's a really interesting concept for a card, but the repeatability really is just a problem. And it's funny because she started falling off at the beginning of this last set because of the prevalence of 13 exactly. And then people just realized you could jam her in anything that's already playing Wind, and it covers everything that isn't 13, and people started doing it. I've seen her in Rydia Turbo lists. I've seen her, basically any deck that's playing Wind is playing her. She has the best category, she has the best job she can have. The only knock on the card is that she costs 3 CP, so you have to have a backup before you play her. But other than that, this card absolutely 110% needed to go. So the other card that was banned is Syldra. So as well, if you've been living under a rock, Syldra allows you to search for 2 water characters, 2 category 5 characters, or 1 of each with a different cost, add them to your hand. So you have to get 2 targets, add both to your hand. So the reasoning that they listed, as the card pool expands, the benefit to using search type cards increases, the possible number of targets increased. Syldra is extremely likely to be used in water decks, but is anticipated its continued use would not be defensible in future iterations of the game, and so it has been banned. I would argue that it was not defensible now. I think that Syldra leads to some of the least interesting and most obnoxious gameplay patterns of this, where you have a wind deck, a water deck playing exactly 8 backups, and your goal is to just Syldra 3 times and get all of your backups, and then after that, every single card in your deck is super alive. But on top of that, it just has a search pool that it shouldn't have. So we're going to go to FF decks. And if we go here, like water, the entire water pool does that. But even something like, we just search category 5, forward backup monster. We're going to go jump to the more recent sets, right? All of, it gets Ferris, Galif, Melusine, it gets Atomos, Biblos. All of these are cards that if you're splashing water, you don't mind searching. Probably the single best, it's not summons. The best cycle of standard unit backups probably in the game's history as far as competitive play. These are all category 5. The crystal gens are. So that's a problem. Search target. It gets Neo X Death for some unholy reason. It did too much. If you played water, your deck was automatically going to be color fixed by this one stupid card, and there's nothing that really could be done about it. There are a lot of weird trickle down problems from Syldra, by the way. This is not a very clean answer. So I don't know if you've ever tried to do this, but if you go to water and we do draw 2 cards, it's not going to show very many of them. The ability to just draw 2 cards is extremely difficult. Luna Freya, 7 CP, draw 2 on entry, or warp 4 to draw 3. Spoiler, Luna Freya is not a good card. Sapphire Weapon has to die and cost 5, right? Alfino, it costs 4, but it's draw 2, discard 1. Marsh, you have to have 5 category FFTA characters on attack to draw 2. Like, drawing 2 cards on 1 burst of anything. Like, this is 6 CP to draw 2. L is like draw 3, discard 2. That's not even like. You have this Famfrit summon, but your opponent has to be on damage 5 to be draw 2. It's extreme, like, it's so hard to draw 2 cards for no cause. This is probably the best one, which is this X-Array. But I think that's actually a big problem for cards like Realm, believe it or not. Realm's best thing was Syldra, and not even necessarily because it was the Search 2, but because there were no other cards that just said draw 2 on a summon in water. If we go here, Moogle, Poo-Poo is conditionally a draw 2 if you have no cards in hand. You have cards that are effectively +2s, something like Remora or Levy 6. But nothing here really says just draw 2 cards as a blanket effect. So I'm really hoping we're on a cycle of hero summons for this set, that one of them says draw 2, even if it's expensive. If nothing else, because I really think that the biggest card, that's like single card, that's going to be hit by that ban, and I'm sure she'll adapt, but I really like this Rydia and the play pattern she can enable. However, without Syldra, this deck is going to become a lot trickier to actually play because there is no 2 counters to Pot of Greed once you get going. I think it can lead some really cool play patterns. I think that for now, your Rydia list probably have to pivot to either Moogle or Poo-Poo or Leviathan. This Leviathan could be really fun with a very high EX count deck. And then, of course, Moogle and Poo-Poo, obviously, allow you to dig deeper into your deck. But it does mean that Rydia is not able to necessarily plus you in the same way she was able to do so before. So I'm very curious what that actually means for that, especially given how good some of the spoiled cards are for that set. I wish they would have gone further. I will be totally honest. There are a lot of cards, like, I would have liked to have seen Lightning restricted to 1 copy per deck. I think this Chocobo should just be banned. I don't think this leads to very healthy play patterns. It leads to a lot of frustration for your opponent the same way that Althea can. I would love to see Alcid restricted or Zeromus just removed from the card pool. I don't think they lead to particularly fun game states. Neo X Death is just one of the worst design cards in the history of the game. This should not have been printed. I would prefer this be banned, but it's getting reprinted, so they were never going to ban that. So I would like to go further with that. Maybe if people are interested and want to hear my thoughts on what I would do to the actual game, I've got a whole list of cards that I think the game would just be better off if they didn't exist. But yeah, anyways, be cooking, be experimenting. Think of things that you want to do in a world where Althea and Syldra don't exist. And I'm very, very excited to see what happens. I think that if we're looking at a pure metagame contest text, I think Wind will be fine. Wind still has the highest density of good cards. Maybe you see more pivots towards trying to get Bismarck back into decks in a way that... And I think Bismarck is actually a slow enough card as to be healthy for the game now. And Althea was just causing problems because of the instant speed nature of what Althea provides. I think a lot of decks that played Syldra are going to start pivoting to Bosch. I think Bosch becomes the new best get anything card in the game. The only other contender is actually a win card, Chocomog. Search for a Chocobo removal. This gets all of your color fix removals, and it's an EX burst. I think those are going to be the new engines of choice for decks trying to do things like Warrior of Light. I think that Bosch is in a particularly really good spot now against everything but exactly 13, but he actually does decently into 13 as well because he gets Brave and the ping effect. We'll see. I think it'll lead to a really interesting metagame moving forward. Let me know what you guys think. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if there's any cards that you think should not be in the game now, and I will see y'all in the next one.